Many of you here in the room over the last 14 months. It's been a ride. The last 14 months has seen an incredible amount of investigatory happenings. Gosh, since this all started on June 13th of 2013, and resulted in the arrest of former Clark County Sheriff Jamey Noel on November the 8th of 2023. This thing has picked up even more steam. And again, I don't need to tell you all about it because you all have been following this very, very closely in your reporting. This afternoon, Special Prosecutor Rick Hurdle has asked to have an opportunity to provide an update and bring us the latest in this really significant case. So, and I believe Mr. Hurdle will also provide an opportunity for some Q&A. So. At this point, I'd like to introduce Special Prosecutor from Ripley County, Richard J. Hurdle. Rick?
Thank you. I feel like I'm taking up residence in Clark County. I want to provide, like the captain said, an update on kind of what's going on, but most of you have just sat through the hearing and the plea hearing with Judge Medlock and Jamey Noel. And as you heard, we will have a sentencing date. To be clear, Judge Medlock has taken the guilty plea under advisement. He's not entered judgment of conviction at this point in time and will not enter judgment of conviction until sentencing occurs. And he will accept the agreement or not accept the agreement at that point in time. As the captain said, there's been a lot of investigation for the last 14 months or so. And a special kudos to Detective Jeff Herron, who's the lead investigator in this matter, and Chris Hansen, the detective who has assisted him basically from day one, and it has been quite a ride. I will say that Casey and Misty Noel are set for trial October 28th. Judge Medlock issued an order last week outlining whether or not those will be joined for trial, and the sum of it is that if the parties can agree to a way to handle the jury, then they will be joined for trial. And if we cannot agree, they will be separate trials, and the oldest case will be tried first, which is Misty Noel. Next are the two defendants that were just charged last week, John Miller and Brittany Faree, who had their initial hearing and bond hearing this morning that many of you were also present at. The date in October is a pretrial, an opportunity to give the judge a status of where the cases are going and whether or not there will be a trial. The omnibus date, as the judge outlined, is a time in which both parties need to file certain motions by, and we do have a February trial date. So those are the 5 defendants that are facing criminal charges now. There's various ages, as you can see, with all 5 of them, and we're going to move forward kind of as time allows. And the next hearing date we'll wait for from Judge Medlock on the potential sentencing date. So I'll take questions. I do have to be in Ripley County, so I can't spend too much time here.
We hear a lot of times from victim impact statements with regards to sentencing. What do you make of just what the judge said regarding soliciting more victims to contact your office? What do you think of that, and how are you going to handle that?
Well, my office has been in contact with the management and the Sheriff's Department, as well as the Department of Revenue, as we've outlined in the plea agreement that you see, and that's how we came up with the restitution figures. I think it's going to be a lot, but I understand Judge Medlock's position that he wants everybody to have the opportunity how this crime has impacted them or their family, and if they are a victim, they should reach out according to him. And if it sounds like he's going to give each of them an opportunity to speak in open court, and if they choose that they don't want to speak, I'm guessing that he will read a letter, or if they want to type something up for him and pass that channel through my office. I think that that's what he's asking us to do, and that was a directive. We have complied with the statute. We've spoken to Sheriff Maples, and we've spoken to Utica and New Chapel and had conversations with them, as well as Department of Revenue. That's how we came up with those numbers.
But you may be getting dozens and dozens of phone calls now from multiple media outlets putting out your office number for contact, I mean, is that extraordinary from your perspective?
I think so. I think so. I mean, obviously, every prosecutor's office deals with a number of victims depending on what type of crime it is. But this could be somewhat overwhelming, and I hope that that my staff can handle that. But I think we're going to comply with what the judge told us to do, and it sounds like it may take more than a day to do the sentencing hearing if all of these victims are going to be permitted to come in and testify. And I don't think it's my role to say, no, you can't testify, given the directive of the judge today.
After Ms. Faree and Mr. Miller's hearing, their attorneys came out and painted their clients as cooperative witnesses who certainly never knew Mr. Noel was feeling and certainly never took anything in exchange for a vote. Do you have to prove a quid pro quo, or was their mere status as council members and those interactions with Mr. Noel, is that enough evidence to prove the conspiracy?
Well, I'd refer you to the probable cause affidavit. One's like 15, 18 pages, and the other's like 21 pages. So we're basing the charges on that probable cause affidavit, and it's the state's responsibility, and in essence my responsibility, to prove each and every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt, and I think that's what we're bound by. No more, but certainly no less than what the statute outlines.
But does it have to be like a direct quid pro quo, or is it merely a conflict of interest? Are those two totally different things, is kind of what I'm getting at?
Well, again, I'm going to refer back to the statute, and I'm going to be bound by what it says in the statute, and in fairness, there probably is not a ton of case law, such as in a drinking and driving or a murder case, where there's a ton of conflict of interest. But the law is on the books to protect people, and a matter of transparency. And we believe that, excuse me, sorry, that there was evidence of a crime. But again, it's going to fall back to whether or not we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, and the elements got to be met, and what's contained in the probable cause affidavit is what we're going to use.
What does the plea agreement, assuming it's accepted, do to Ms. Faree and Mr. Miller's cases? Does it change them?
It doesn't change anything. And I think my only comment on that, coming down here, is job's not finished.
Two questions, sir. As far as the guilty plea today, what does that do to the, as far as the investigation into potential co-conspirators still remaining out there? Is that something that it's going to be a continuing investigation, or does it pretty much, paraphrasing, die with Noel?
I think that's a question maybe for the state police, but I think that I don't want to handcuff them if there's evidence of a crime, whether there's a co-conspirator or another defendant or someone else. I don't think it's in Detective Herron, and it's not in me to turn a blind eye to if we're presented evidence of an additional crime, to not at least look at it and weigh the options of potentially filing additional criminal charges on somebody.
Thank you. And the second question is, looking at Miller and Faree, it appears you all have kind of chosen to use an umbrella charge. What is the theory behind not charging individual conflicts of interest and going with the one umbrella charge?
Well, I think that we just looked at the time period of which that they were members of the county council, and that's what we decided to move forward on,
okay,
instead of trying to line out each and every time that something may or may not have happened.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Why is 15 years appropriate? That seems to be on at least the lower end from when, of course, you're hearing the maximum possible penalties that were read at the initial hearings for Mr. Noel.
So it's the state's position that this is the upper spectrum of the actual sentencing range. You hear an F5 felony carries from 1 to 6 years, and then you're saying, Hurdle, what are you doing? He pled guilty to all these. Why can't you just stack, stack, and stack? Well, there's provisions within the state of Indiana that does not allow for things to be consecutive to one another, but allows for what's called concurrent, one with the other. And so our work in this, and provided by certain people that have helped me do this research, says that we are on the upper end of the spectrum of this 15-year sentence, and that's why we did what we did.
What's the top that he could or could have faced?
I think the top is subject to to interpretation. It's not so black and white. If you ask some legal scholars, I think they may say 7 years. There may be other people that say 20 years. And I know I'm probably not answering your question and say you just answer the question, but it's not such a black and white topic that I can just say, here is the number, because there's single episodes of criminal conduct, there's multiple episodes of criminal conduct, there's concurrence, there's consecutive, and it's not quite so clear. But as I mentioned to Mark, that we believe this is the higher end of the spectrum of charges.
So it's 15 years with 3 years of probation after?
That's correct.
Okay. And in regards to the restitution for the victims, so UTVFA has just done a lot of layoffs, and they may be down to as few as 8 employees. So you're paying out $2.8 million to an organization that has just significantly downsized. Are you going to have any say in what they should do with that $2.8 million?
No, that's not my purview. That's going to be up to Utica, and if the judge accepts this agreement, if he sets certain provisions, and if he accepts it as is, so that would go to Utica for them to handle as they see fit. That's something I can't control.
Can you shed some light as to why the ghost employment charges were dismissed in the deal?
Well, the ghost employment merged with that official misconduct. If you heard Mr. Wilder, as he established a factual basis with the defendant, he talked about that he had these people, a number of them, 4 or 5, that worked on his properties, his father-in-law's properties, and a number of other properties, and that was in his capacity as sheriff. So they sort of merged together, and so that's why we felt the dismissal of those 4 counts was appropriate here.
Given that the judge would like to hear from taxpayers, people who don't own $100 bills, and you've seen some of the language in his courtroom, are you concerned that he may not accept this plea deal?
Well, I think that's, again, a question probably better asked for him. I think that weighing everything and being involved from the very beginning, hearing the investigation, charging, and then working our way through the discovery process, we felt that this was appropriate. But at the end of the day, the judge has to say, I agree with you, Mr. Hurdle, Mr. Wilder, Mr. Voiles, Mr. Steward, or he says no, and then basically it's like he said, that hearing never happened, and we start again and set a trial date. And if that happens, then we'll saddle up and go to trial if that's what we need to do.
I'll ask the elephant in the room. The timing of Mr. Noel deciding to go with a plea deal coincide with a lame duck governor that is a close associate. Is there concerns? I know my viewers have great concern that turn around and December 31st there's going to be a pardon of this. What is the likelihood, and what have you heard on your all's end?
I can't speak to that. I do not have the governor's direct line, and he's certainly not communicating with me, and I'm not communicating with him about the status of this case, and I have to control only what I can control, and that's the prosecution of Jamey Noel, and what happens after that, it's going to be out of my control, and so we're going to do our job, and then what happens, happens.
Rick, can you shed any light on the conversations that led up to Jamey Noel accepting this plea deal, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back?
Well, that might be a question you have to ask Jamey Noel. What was it in his mind to do it? I can't connect with Jamey Noel. Everything is through his attorneys.
Your conversations with his
My conversation with them, ultimately, that I think I sent it out last Friday, was that he's admitting guilt because he committed the crimes. You heard the question, the very 1 or 2 questions that I asked him. You don't have to plead guilty here today. Why are you pleading guilty? It's because he committed the crimes. So that I can only speculate that that's what he said.
Would it be fair to say you were a little surprised to get that notification that he was wanting to plead guilty?
I think you do this long enough, it's hard to get surprised. But I think that an agreement to 15 years of a sentence, at least proposing it to the court and to the judge, we've come a long way since that initial hearing back in November of 23.
Do you think you were a faithful steward of the people of Southern Indiana in your regards and special prosecutor in this case, and do you think they should be proud of the deal that you've gotten both sides to agree to?
You'll have to take a poll down here. I don't know. I mean, I'm probably not for everybody, but I feel like there's been a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of heartache trying to take into consideration the folks in Clark County, the victims in Clark County. This is new terrain for me. I'm 2 hours away from here, and I'm at times a little bit of a fish out of water. But I feel like I may be biased, but the work that the state police have done and the attorneys who've assisted me, they should be given a ticker tape parade.
Do you think this case will serve as a deterrent to future public officials' misbehavior?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can change criminal mindset and sometimes you can't. And whether or not this changes somebody, I hope so. I think that him going to prison for 12 years, if the judge accepts this agreement, should be a pretty big deterrent for a guy who lived the lifestyle that he lived leading up to this. I mean, you all know the charges on the American Expresses and the judge talking about $800 belts and Tom James suits and $180,000 there. It's about to be a wake-up call if the judge accepts this agreement.
2 questions. Time for 2 questions.
So with Jamey Noel and the questionable spending from the sheriff's commissary, I know council members in Ripley County have brought it to attention, at least according to news articles up there. Do you see the potential for some revamping of the requirements and basically the strings attached to the sheriff's commissary fund? I mean, he was paying $10,000 a year to Sheriff's Youth Ranch, just like your all sheriff up in Ripley County was.
I think that's something for the council, the commissioners, or the legislative body to deal with. That's, again, out of my purview. I mean, it's something that I don't control or can't control. Yes, sir.
Do you anticipate, just based on the investigation so far, additional indictments, additional defendants?
I think there's a possibility of that, yes. We're not prepared to move forward today or tomorrow. I think we're at least evaluating Jamey Noel's guilty plea and the initial hearing with Miller and Faree, and I think one step at a time.
Will he be asked to cooperate with you guys?
Well, his plea agreement does not call for any cooperation, so I don't think that that's on the table.
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today.